welcome to a new episode of the Marvel and DC Retrospective Podcast. I am Kay Chamberlain, the host of the podcast, and this is a new episode of the show on the podcast, Flash Forward, where I go through every single issue of Flash Volume 2 and explain what happens in them. Last week we finished off Invasion, and now this week we're going to be continuing with The Flash, starting with Flash issue 23. So, without further ado, let's just get straight into it. It's written by William Esner-Loebs, with art by Larry Melstead and Tim DeZahn, and Gordon Purcell, who is a guest artist for this issue. So the issue starts off with Mason Trollbridge, Wally's neighbor, talking about the Clipper. If you remember, the Clipper is a villain, not a villain. He's a vigilante who would kill criminals, and then if he didn't kill them, he would instead punish them by clipping off their ear so that people would forever know that they are a criminal. And that he was harsh but fair in that, even if he saves people, which he does in this issue at the very beginning, he saves a group of people and they're all praising him. But then Clipper is like, yeah, but you've all done bad things too, so you're all getting punished as well. So he punishes these people too because they've done bad things. You know, he gets the kid to burn all his toys because he broke another kid's toy. It's kind of funny. He's played very over the top and edgy, kind of like a parody of Batman. So Mason decides that, because he was the Clipper's sidekick, he decides to become the new Clipper. So he's like, I'm going to go off and fight crime. And he's writing a letter to Wally to let him know that that's what he's going to be doing. Because he wants Wally to know that he's the new Clipper. Meanwhile, Wally is dealing with the fact that he's lost all of his powers because of the gene bomb that went off in Invasion. And he's lost Chunk as a friend. Chunk just wants nothing to do with him. So he's kind of like, well, Chunk hates me and my mom is ordering me around, so life's back to normal, I guess. And that's when he gets home and he finds the note from Mason, and decides that he's got to go head off and find Mason. And his mom's like, you don't have powers. At least call the Manhunter and get him to help you. And Wally's just like, I don't have time for that, Mom. I gotta go right now. Meanwhile, Chunk gets a call from Wally's mom, who I'm gonna start calling him. I keep calling him Chunk, but I want to start calling him Chester now because Chunk is more of a derivative name for him. So Chester gets a call from Wally's mom asking for Chester to help Wally, and Chester decides not to because he doesn't like Wally. He's he's supposed to be my best friend and he treats me like shit. Mason then talks about how he met the Clipper. He was being bullied by a couple of guys, and then the Clipper came in and beat the shit out of them, and Mason was like, yeah, you're my hero. And then he became the Clipper's sidekick, and they went out, and he supplied the Clipper with all of his ammo and stuff like that. He was basically the Robin to the Clipper. So Mason, as the new Clipper, goes and helps this guy who's being held hostage by another guy. But the funny thing is that he ends up helping the guy that is holding him hostage, because it turns out that this guy, his wife, got shot in a police shootout with Parasite, the Superman villain, and so he's trying to get the money in order to help her in hospital. So Clipper's just like, hey dude, why don't you just give him the money? And he's like, how much money do you need? And he's like, $4,000. The guy's like, if I give him $4,000, I'm gonna be ruined. And so the Clipper just kind of bargains with him, and he's like, all right, well, what about 3,500? How about? And the guy's just like, no, I'm not going above 2,000. What about 3,000? I'm not going above that. And so he's like, okay, I'll throw in an extra $40 to even it out. And they ration it out after that. And the guy is, he's got bombs strapped to his waist, and he just pulls them off, and he's like, I'm not gonna need this anymore. Here you go, and hands it to the Clipper, and the Clipper's just like, yeah, all right, we did it. That was awesome. And when he leaves, he finds Wally, and Wally's just like, hey, like, I've heard about what you've been doing. You've been going around saving people. You went to, like, a gas station and stopped some criminals because they couldn't stop laughing at you. And then Wally's just like, he gets into the car with Mason, like, into Mason's truck, and Mason's just like, let's go and solve some crimes. And, Wally's just like, why you got so much gas in the back of your truck? And Mason's like, you never know, like, when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you gotta fight criminals, you gotta bring gas with you just in case you run out. And Wally's like, there's a lot more gas stations today than there were back then. And Mason's just like, oh, I guess, I didn't even think about that. I guess things have changed since the Clipper was around. And as they're talking, suddenly they realize there's a lot of weird shit going on in town all of a sudden. There's, like, half, like, human-animal hybrids. The Pied Piper has been turned into a puppet. There's a man that's, like, a half fly. Like, he's like a dude that's been turned into a fly. Wally tries to get the attention of somebody who's walking around, and they kind of discover that this human is actually a fly that's been turned into a human. And Wally decides that the only person who could have possibly done this was Abracadabra, and that he must be back. Abracadabra, we all know Abracadabra. If you've been listening to this, I've talked about Abracadabra. I feel like I don't really have to explain it. You can go back and listen to the trial of Barry Allen, like the trial of the Flash, because he plays a big role in that. He's just a magician. So Wally and Mason realize that the pathway that they're walking on is made out of people, which is really weird. It's kind of disgusting. It's like got all their faces and stuff in it. And because Abracadabra turned him into a sidewalk, and Abracadabra comes out of the sidewalk in a burst of flames, and he's just like, I am Abracadabra, and I'm here to get my revenge on the Flash, and I'm going to kill both of you. I don't know how he knows that Wally is the Flash. I guess he's been watching Wally and has figured things out, because the last time we saw Abracadabra, he had seemingly died in the future. But he attacks Wally and Mason with a bunch of magic, but Wally decides, tells Mason that's like, as long as we hide and he can't see us, he can't use magic on us because he's so stupid that, he can only cast magic on the things that he can see. And so Abracadabra is like, well, since I can't find you, I'm going to just go and take down your gilded den. And he teleports away, and Wally's just like, my gilded den? But I live in an apartment. And Mason's like, maybe Abracadabra still thinks that you live in a mansion. And that's when Wally's like, oh no, Chunk. So Chunk's at home, chilling, and he's talking about how, he's not going to call Wally. But then he goes to call Wally anyway, because he kind of, wants to be friends with Wally. And that's when Abracadabra shows up. He's like, I'm going to just, what should I destroy first? Oh, I know, I'll destroy you. And Chunk's just like, and I'm gonna just absorb you. But it doesn't work, because Abracadabra uses his powers on Chunk to, keep him in place. And then he transforms him into a puppet. And then he decides, he's like, I can sense that there is something within you, so I'm going to split you in two. And he uses his magic to take the black hole out of Chunk. And so Chunk loses his powers. And he doesn't just lose his powers. Taking the black hole out actually makes Chunk, thin. And Chunk is just like, I'm normal again, but that black hole was a part of me, and so now I'm sad. And then he tries to escape because he's just a regular dude, and Abracadabra stops him from escaping. But Chunk ends up going out another way, and Abracadabra is like, I'm gonna use my magic to make you really fat and old, and just keep getting older and fatter, and he just does that, and that's what happens. But before Chunk dies of old age, Wally shows up with Mason, but Abracadabra is like, I'm going to set your car on fire, yeah, and he uses his abilities to set Mason's car on fire, so Wally's just like, let's go, get out, jumps out with Mason. The car explodes as Abracadabra is doing a professive talk. He's just like, I am Abracadabra, and then and then the car explodes, seemingly killing him, but Wally is like, he's definitely not dead because I can't see a body. And Chunk's just like, you came for me. Wally's like, of course I did. Like, you're my pal. And Chunk gives him a big hug. Also, Chester is, he's fat again. He doesn't have powers, but, like, because of Abracadabra's magic, he got fat again. And so he's fat but without powers, because I guess Chester has to be fat in order to be a character. But yeah, he gives Wally a hug, and Wally and Mason high five, or at least Wally's not trying to high five Mason. He's just got his hand out, and Mason just gives him a high five, and that's it. That's the end of the issue. Really enjoyed it. I like the slapstick kind of like over the top idea of the Clipper being this parody of Batman. Mason as the Clipper is real fun. Seeing him interact with the criminals, trying to get them to come to an understanding was really funny. Like bargaining with the hostage and the guy that was holding him hostage was really funny. And getting to see Abracadabra again, like Abracadabra's a really fun villain, all about showmanship and stuff. And I think William did a really good job taking Abracadabra to that next level and making him even more insane. Like he rhymes in this issue. He's started doing like a rhyming gimmick now that I think really fits with his character. But yeah, that was really good issue. Really enjoyed it. So, issue 24 of The Flash, written by William Mesner-Loebs with art by Greg LaRocque and Tim DeZahn. This one, it's real freaking good. So Tina McGee is trying to help Wally get his powers back. And it's not just Tina, it's also Jerry McGee and Mason Trowbridge who are helping as well. And in order to figure out how to get his powers back, she's on the phone to people who are related to other Speed characters. So she calls Lois Lane and asks her how Superman speed works. And Lois is just like, I don't really 100% know. Like, all I know is that his speed comes from the sun. The sun creates an aura around him that protects his suit and his cape, but it's really hard to explain because, like, his aura protects him, but it doesn't protect other people like the Flash's aura does. And Tina's just like, oh, well, like, I thought I might as well have asked, you know. I'm sorry that you weren't able to help me with this, but, yeah, I'm still at step one of figuring out how to get Wally's powers back. But Lois is like, hey, if you get a story out of this, let me know, because I'd love to be a part of it, because I'm a journalist, and, you know, I want to make money. So after calling and talking to Lois, Tina calls Jay Garrick's wife, and asks her about Jay, and she explains that, like, Jay was never as fast as Barry, but when he was around Barry, he said he always felt faster, like he felt 20 years younger. And then she's like, I'm sorry, but I can't talk, I don't want to talk about Jay anymore, like, I'm really sad talking about Jay. And so, she asks to stop talking about him, and Tina is like, of course, thank you, like, everything you said was enough. And she lets her go. So, Jerry comes over and he's like, how's it going, Tina? And Tina's just like, it's going okay, but, like, I feel like we're getting closer, but we're still a ways away from getting Wally's powers back. And it turns out that Tina and Mrs. West are getting along really well. It's really ironic. It's like, when her and Wally were dating, Mrs. West hated her, but now that they're not dating, she treats Tina like a daughter. She's like, you're like my daughter still, even though you're not dating Wally, you're still like a daughter to me. And she hates Wally's new girlfriend. They all kind of hate her. They all think that she's like a gold digger and stuff. So they all kind of make fun of her. But Jerry also doesn't really like Mrs. West that much and thinks that she's crazy. But yeah, so Tina tells Jerry that they've got to set up the experiment to get Wally's powers back, and Jerry's like, alright, I'll go get Mason and we'll set up the experiment. Meanwhile, Wally calls Chester and tells him everything that's going on, and invites Chester to come and watch the experiment and see Wally get his powers back. And Chester's like, yeah, of course. And Chester's like, how you been doing, like, we're searching for a job? And Wally's like, I can't get a job. Like, all of the jobs are taken. For normal people, they're all taken. And because I don't have speed, I can't join Red Trinity and do, like, their courier services, you know, because they're not fast enough. But I have been sending my money to my blood to labs for a bit of money so that they can, like, research my blood and see if there's a way to get my powers back. So I've been making money a little bit that way. And so after agreeing to go to watch the experiment, Chester gets a knock on the door, and he answers it, and it's his uncle and aunt and all of his cousins. He has, like, 9 cousins, or, like, 8 cousins, 7 cousins, and they basically all show up, and they're like, hey, we heard you have a mansion, and we've decided that we're going to come and live with you, because that way you won't be alone. And you're just thinking, like, man, they're going to be using Chester, aren't they? Because Chester's like, oh, thank you. But, like, he's clearly doesn't see the fact that, like, his family has showed up out of nowhere because they want to take advantage of him. Like, all of a sudden, this family shows up and they're like, hey, we want to live in your mansion. It's, like, very suspicious. Tina visits Wally, and Wally's busy making himself a new costume. It's not a new design, so this isn't a huge moment. It's the first time he's making a new costume. It just looks exactly like Barry's. He's like, Barry gave me the ingredients to make a costume. And so he explains to Tina how to make a costume. He has to, like, douse the suit in these special chemicals that make it stretch and so that when it comes in contact with the air, it grows and allows him to wear it, but also shrinks and allows it to go inside a ring. You know, so he kind of explains how all that stuff works within this fictional universe. And Tina's like, hey, we got the experiment ready. Why didn't you come check it out? Well, like, it's not ready yet, but, like, we're building the gizmo that's going to give your speed back, hopefully. Why don't you come and check it out? So Wally goes and checks out. Mason and Jerry are building it, and they explain that because Wally got his powers from chemicals being doused on him and being electrocuted, that they've created this thing that will, like, it's like a little house that he steps inside. It's like a little shower, and it douses him in chemicals and then electrocutes him, and hopefully he'll get his powers from that. He'll get his powers back. They kind of they explain Wally's powers as, like, his body absorbs heat, and the heat is then attributed to his muscles, and that's why he never gets tired. But they can't really explain why he has to eat so much. And then this parcel delivery guy comes and delivers Wally the blood that he's supposed to deliver to LA. It's like his blood that he sent off, and now he's got to deliver it to LA so that they can keep testing on it. And then the guys are like, hey, what? Did you take part in the invasion? Like, the delivery man's like, hey, did you take part in helping against the invasion? And Wally's just like, yeah, I'm Batman. And Mason's like, yeah, I'm Robin. And they were all kind of laughing, and the delivery man's just like, jokers. And so Wally leaves the trio, Terry McGee and Jerry and... Well, not Terry McGee, Tina McGee, Jerry, and Mason to continue building the experiment. Goes to visit his mum, and his mum is like, do you really have to do this, Wally? Like, and Wally's like, yeah, I do. Like, Chester and Mason almost died the other day. I want my speed back so I can be able to help save people like them. Save my friends, save my family, and save anyone. And also, I like being a god. He literally says that. He's like, and having powers made me feel like a god, and I like that. So I want my powers back. And I'm like, yeah, more power to you, Wally. If you want to, if that's what you care about, then, like, well, cool. Like, you know, just let him have powers. So they hold the experiment. They order a bunch of pizzas as well, because Tina's like, I ordered like 30 pizzas just in case you get your speed back, because you'll probably be hungry. And so they set the experiment. They douse Wally in chemicals and they electrocute him. They douse him in chemicals and they're like, how do you feel? And he's like, wet. And then they electrocute him and they're like, how do you feel? And he's like, tingling. And then they're just like, do you feel any different? And Wally's like, no. And Tina's like, did you feel any different when you first got struck by lightning and got your powers? Wally was like, no. And Tina's like, well, then maybe it worked. And why don't you try and do something at super speed? And Wally's just like, what? It's like, put on your costume. And Wally instantly has the costume on when she says that. Like, instantly, panel to panel. Which is already showcasing that, like, he seems to be faster than he previously was. It's like, it worked! Wally's like, all right, let's really put this to the test. Let's see how fast I can go. If I've really got my speed back, let's do it. Let's do a test run. And he gets ready to run, and he runs. And it's really hard, like, kind of set this up, but, like, Wally destroys the city. He runs off and, like, he sets the roads on fire. Because earlier on, he mentioned that Barry was so fast that the grass beneath him would set alight. Wally sets the road on fire. He causes such a massive sonic boom that, like, his friends, like, he deafens Tina's ears. Like, she goes deaf. Don't know for how long, but she's deaf at the moment. She gets sent flying 20 feet back into another lot. Everyone is just thrown around. Everyone hears it. Windows shatter all around. Lois Lane from the Daily Planet is like, she said about it making a story for her, and it did. Tina is like shaking, like everyone's shaking from this, and they just see this cataclysm that like Wally has created, and she's like, Wally was talking about how like Barry sets fire to like how like the way Barry explained that like when he ran it was like he could destroy anything like he could set fire to a piece of hay, but like we never questioned what actually would have happened to that piece of hay. And this is kind of them realizing the destructive power that Wally now holds. It's pretty fucked up. There's fire everywhere. Everyone is devastated, and that's where it ends. Wally has destroyed downtown Keystone City, or downtown wherever they live. I don't know if they live in Keystone City yet, but that's issue 24, and we're gonna find out what happens in the next issue, where this goes. It's a pretty fucking crazy ending, because it just comes out of nowhere, where Wally runs for the first time with his super speed back, and he is incredibly powerful. But yeah, great issue. So good. Such a great ending. Such a dramatic ending. Loved it. Alright, the next issue that we're going to be talking about is issue 25, written by William Mesner-Loebs, with art by Greg LaRocque and Larry Malstedt. So, Wally has disappeared after running across America and destroying everything, because he's just gotten his speed back. Tina McGee is getting hounded by reporters, and they're all saying all the insensitive they're all asking the insensitive questions that reporters ask, like, were you responsible for the death of your boyfriend? Like, do you was it your fault that your boyfriend destroyed half the town? Shit like that. Lois Lane is there, and there's this asshole, whose name is Timmons, and he asks like an asshole question to her. He's like, Mrs. McGee, now that your failed experiment has killed your young lover and thrown the country into chaos, are you? And Lois Lane is just like, that's enough, Timmons. Alright, fuck off. Get out of here. That's it. I'm not gonna let you talk to my friend like this. And so Lois and Tina have a little bit of a moment together, and Tina's just like, thank you, Lois. I'll talk to you soon. I gotta go and figure out what happened to Wally. So she heads back to Chester's house, where she meets up with Mason and Jerry, and the three of them try to figure out what happened to Wally. Apparently, a crater has been created in New Mexico, and they reckon that that's probably where Wally is, but there are, like, authorities and stuff there that are, like, looking at him around, so they can't just, like, go wandering in. But they kind of also figure out that, like, they might not have a choice but to go in there anyway, and regardless of what authorities would tell them. They also meet Chester's uncle and aunt and, like, his cousins, and they're a bit weirded out by the fact that, like, because they're like, who's that? And Chester's like, oh, that's probably one of my cousins. I don't know which one it is, because I don't really know my cousins. And they're like, you don't know your cousins? Like, that's weird, Chester. And that's when Chester gets a call on the phone, and it's Wally. He's like, Chunk, help me. And, he's like, so cold, blind, need help. And then the phone hangs up. And so Tina, Mason, and Jerry are like, we gotta go to New Mexico. We gotta go now because Wally needs help. but we don't have anything to get there. Like, we don't have any vehicles or anything. You know, my car's back in wherever I left it. And Chester's like, I got a truck for you. It's actually Wally's truck. He left it here. He was supposed to pick it up. And so they go and get this truck, which I am assuming might eventually become the Flashmobile. That's what you would assume, right? Like, that this is setting up, like, Wally's Flashmobile. So Mason, Tina, and Jerry take the truck. Meanwhile, Chester agrees to look out for Wally's mum. She's like, we're gonna find Wally. And Chester's like, good luck. And sees them off. So they go on a road trip where they follow the trail of molten lava that Wally has left behind from setting everything on fire at super speed. Tina talks about how the fact that she is in hell right now because she has to deal with Jerry, her psycho ex-boyfriend who isn't a psycho anymore, and Mason, who is just a weirdo who's just really weird. Like, he's just a weirdo who fantasizes over a guy that kills criminals. So she's just miserable right now. She's literally only doing this in order to find Wally. So the group heads through a forest where they believe Wally has been through. And, like, the forest has been destroyed by Wally. And Mason is like, wait a minute, I just saw Wally. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? I saw him. Like, I saw a man in red run through here. It had to be him. So they go after where Mason said he saw this guy in red. And they find a piece of Wally's tattered costume. And that's when Tina's like, man, Wally's aura isn't as protective as I thought it was. Like, I thought he had a protective aura. Turns out he doesn't because his suit has been torn up. And that would never happen to Barry Allen. And Tina kind of talks about the fact that Barry Allen might not have been human because she notices the difference between Barry's power and Wally, where, like, Barry never got tired. Barry never had to eat anything. Barry never got hurt while running at super speed. He never destroyed things. He never tore up his clothes or anything. So she's like, was Barry even human? So we're kind of digging a little bit deeper and seeing, like, what was Barry? And she's like, it had to do with the Thunderbolt, right? Like, was Barry even human? Because it's clear he's not a metahuman. Because Wally's a metahuman, and yet he has weaknesses, unlike Barry. So, it's pretty interesting. While they're on their road trip, you know, they stay off at different motels and stuff, and things don't get easier. They don't get along with each other very well. They eventually come across this guy. He's dressed in, like, a red shirt with a Flash symbol on it. He's got, like, a homemade Flash mask on. He's like, stop, citizens, in the name of the Flash. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, the Flash is our friend Wally, and, like, you're not him, so get out of our way. And this guy's like, you know, I am the Flash. When he died like a flaming comet, I felt his spirit pass into me. I am the Flash to the last degree. And Tina's just like, don't you fucking say his name. He's like, hey, I'll beat the shit out. Like, the Flash is just like, hey, I'm gonna punch you 1,000,000 times. Ha! And he, like, punches Mason, Jerry in the gut. He's not doing it at super speed, but he's like, I'm doing it so fast. I'm punching you at super speed. And Tina just elbows him in the face and then kicks him in the nuts. And the guy's just left on the ground like, oh, my stomach. And he's like, oh, my speed failed me. It must have been taken by Abracadabra or a weather wizard or somebody. Gotta be faster. And he gets on, like, his little moped or, like, his little motorcycle. And, like, I think it's a moped. And he just drives off down the road after them. It's like, faster, faster, faster. I love that part. It's so good. I'm curious to see who this guy is. They kind of contemplate the fact that, like, he was around the same age as Wally, so there has to be some reason for that, right? Like, it's a little bit of a coincidence. Eventually, they come across the crater that Wally was last seen in, and they believe that Wally disappeared here, but Tina, that he just, like, made it to that spot and blew up and disappeared, and then there was a crater left. But Tina figures out that, like, he didn't blow up and disappear to create the crater. He stopped. And upon stopping, he skidded all the way through Mexico, and the point that he actually stopped in was, like, he like, tried to stop, and he tripped over, and when he tripped through New Mexico, and when he landed, he created the crater. So Wally is there somewhere. The way she figures that out is she has Jerry run across the crater, and he trips over where Wally tripped. So that's how they figure out that Wally tripped and fell. So they decide to head off to go find him, because he has to be out here somewhere. It means that he is out there somewhere, and that he hasn't disappeared. It's just a question of, where is he? You know, he's probably injured. Eventually, like, communication between them just breaks down, and they finally, like, they've been kind of holding it in, but they finally just have a massive argument, Mason and Tina, because they're just, like, they've been traveling around together, and they are two personalities that just do not get along, and Mason just ends up going for a walk, because he's like, the last thing I said to Wally was, you know, I said, you're a dummy, so I gotta find him. And he heads off and goes to sleep. It's like, I'm gonna go take some rest. And Tina and Jerry, they start to bond again, and they actually kiss. You know, they're in love again. Like, being on this road trip has brought them closer together, while it's pushed Tina and Mason further apart. And as they're kissing, a mysterious figure hiding behind a rock, who is very clearly Wally West, who is full of, like, sticks and pins just sticking out of his skin, probably from running through the forest. They even mentioned that earlier, how, like, do you think Wally was protected from, like, the forest shrapnel? He ran through it? Guess our answer is no. But yeah, we're gonna find out if this is Wally. I think it's pretty obvious that it's Wally, but, you know, maybe it isn't. We're gonna find out. So, now we're moving on to issue 26, written by William Mesmer-Lowe's, with art by Greg LaRocque and Larry Melstead. So, continuing on from the last issue, Jerry is writing a letter to Mrs. West, just to let her know what's been going on with her son and what they're currently looking for. They've started off, they've got rooms in Bronco Willie's chow house and motel, in the place that they've been staying, which is just a very small town, and they believe that, like, there's a chance that Wally has passed through this town, and that's when the sheriff of the town, David Castillo, shows up, and he's like, I need to talk to you, Jerry, and he basically says to Jerry that, like, this town, like, is very remote. Like, the nearest hospital is 30 miles away, the nearest gas station is 70 miles away. So, like, if something happens here, like a superhuman battle, we're not going to be able to recover from that very well, and it's going to hurt us a lot. And so Jerry's like, so you want us to get out of here, right? And he's like, no, I just want to know, like, is the Flash here? Like, I just want you to give us a heads up. Is the Flash alive? And Jerry's like, and is he here? And Jerry's like, that's the thing, like, maybe. We don't know. Like, that's why we're here. We're here looking for him. We're hoping to find him. And he's like, okay, that's all I wanted to know. And that's when they hear, like, a big screaming noise, and they're like, what the heck is that? And they go out, and they find the guy that was pretending to be the Flash being beaten up by a couple of guys, and because he called them dinks, and Castillo comes and helps him, and basically this guy pretending to be the Flash is like, I told them about the Porcupine Man and they wouldn't believe me, those stupid dinks. And then, so they attack him, and this guy grabs Castillo's gun and points it at them, and that's when he gets hit over the head with a cane by Jerry that knocks him out. And he's like, what was he talking about? Like, this stupid, like, we've met this Flash, like, we know this guy, like, he was out on the road. What was he mean when he was talking about the Porcupine Man? And Castillo is like, people have seen sightings of this thing that we call the Porcupine Man. It's like a legendary, it's like a myth. They say it's like an alien, like a spiked alien that is seen every 10 years. in the desert, and he unmasks the fake Flash to reveal that it is Geraldo Madre, his cousin, who is just, he's a weirdo who gets a little bit too obsessed with the Flash. Castillo gets pissed off at his cousin and leaves. So Jerry goes to Tina and they talk about the Porcupine Man, and they go and eat at a local diner where they meet this woman named Delia, who is a waitress, and she says that the Porcupine Man has passed through her house many times, and that if they come over for dinner, they might be able to see him. And so, because it's the only lead they have to go on, Tina and Jerry decide that they're going to go to Delia's house. But before they go to Delia's house, Jerry meets a little kid who's a massive fan of his. And this kid is like, man, you were the speed demon. Like, everyone looks up to you because they're so scared of you. Just like how they're scared of Superman and the Joker. And Jerry's like, yeah, but Superman is a good guy who helps people while the Joker is insane. And then he was like, and then the kid's like, the Flash was stronger than you, right? And Jerry's like, no, actually, I was stronger than the Flash, but the Flash outsmarted me. And he also saved me from dying. And then the kid was like, so the Flash turned you into a wimp, huh? And Jerry's just like, well, that's an interpretation. And, so Tina and Jerry then decide to head off to Delia's house with Mason. And Mason again talks about the fact that, like, the reason he wants to see Wally again is the last time he saw him, he called him a dummy. And he's like, he's got to be alive so I can tell him I didn't mean it. Which is a very, it's a nice little moment of him being like, he's just got to be alive so I can tell him he didn't mean it, that I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to call him a dum-dum. So Delia is preparing dinner, and that's when she hears a noise out in her backyard. She's like, oh, those must be my chickens. Like, the weasels occasionally come and they attack the chickens, so I'm just gonna go out and deal with them. And Jerry's like, careful, Delia, I'll go check myself. So Jerry goes to check the chicken pen. He hears, like, a rustling noise, and he comes across Wally eating the chickens. He's, like, crouched with, like, covered in spikes. He's like, my God, Wally! And he's, like, covered in blood and feathers. He's just torn these chickens apart and is eating them raw. It's pretty disgusting. And that's where we leave off in the issue, is feral Wally eating chickens. So, issue 27. Still written by William Mesler-Lowe's with art by Greg LaRocque and Larry Melstedt. This issue starts off with Chunk is currently pretty overwhelmed with his cousins and stuff that have arrived who he's never met before. So he's dealing with them. And meanwhile on the TV, Captain Cold, aka Leonard Snart, is being interviewed on television about the disappearance of Wally West. And the fact that Captain Cold has now started branding himself as like as a hero, as a redeemed villain, where he and Golden Glider now have a business where they go out and they find people's lost items and stuff and bring them back for a price. So they've started that whole business, which is pretty fun. You call like 1-800-COLD, I think it is what he says, which is funny. Meanwhile, Joan Garrick, the wife of Jay Garrick, goes and visits Mary West. The doorbell doesn't work, so she says she used her like credit card to break in, and she's like, I hope that's okay, but I just can't, which is weird, but she's like, I came here because, I've lost my husband, you've lost your son, and the one thing I learnt was that it's always good to have somebody to talk to. So that's what I'm here for. I'm here so that you have somebody to talk to, because I'm guessing you do. And they hug it out, and so it seems like Mary West and Joan Garrick are going to become friends, and they're going to have like their own little story going on, which is interesting. I kind of like that. I like the fact that Jay Garrick's cast of characters is being melded with the Flash, especially since there's no Justice Society book at the moment, and it makes sense that Jay Garrick's characters would be within the Flash mythos, in the Flash series. So Jerry and friends, Tina and Mason and Delia, the girl who, the woman whose house they are currently at, they're dealing with the fact that they found Wally, and he is the Porcupine Man, which is the monster that the town has been dealing with, and he's freaking out. He's gone insane. He currently sees everyone as monsters, like monstrous hallucinations, which really freaks him out. And Tina comes to the conclusion that, like, because they can kind of see his aura, and she comes to the conclusion that his aura is feeding on himself, and that's why he's getting, like, so hungry, but, like, it's gonna destroy him if they don't do something, because it's feeding on him, and it's, like, wearing away, like, his like, mental stability, and that's why he's going insane. It's because his aura is feeding on it. And eventually, like, he'll die. So they've got to figure out how to help him. Meanwhile, David, the sheriff of the town, has to deal with his son, who is upset that his dad has locked his cousin away in jail. And his dad has to explain to him that, like, you know, his cousin isn't the Flash. His cousin truly believed he was the Flash, and that's why he's currently locked away, because he needs help. And the kid's like, okay, Dad, night. And then later on, his son breaks out of, like, escapes from home with his friends, because they decide that they want to go and talk to David, because they want David to play with them as the Flash. But when they get there, they realize how crazy David is. And they're like, man, Dad's cousin is scary. Like, I don't like how insane he is. Let's go visit the cave on the edge of town instead and have some adventures there. And so they leave David's cousin and they go to the cave and they go inside and have a little bit of an exploration around. But then a cave-in happens and they get trapped inside the cave. And the townsfolk then begin searching for the children who have all gone missing. And they believe that the children have been taken by the Porcupine Man, which we know is Wally, and we know isn't the case. So they start going on a manhunt for the Porcupine Man. And then Captain Cold and Golden Glider show up and they say, hey, like, we'll give you our expertise. Like, we'll go and hunt down the Porcupine Man for you and we'll find those children. That's a promise. And so, you know, and David doesn't like the fact that they're relying on Golden Glider or Captain Cold. They're like, you know, sure, the council may have hired you as a consultant, but that doesn't mean you can just come in here and help us. And Captain Cold is just like, look, we're not going to get in your way. We're going to do things our way. And they create like an ice trail to ride on in order to go searching for the Porcupine Man. Meanwhile, Jerry goes and talks to David's cousin to see if David's cousin knows anything about the Porcupine Man, to learn more about it. And that's when David's cousin explains how he's met the Porcupine Man. He was out on the road and he saw the Porcupine Man just like speed in. He described the Porcupine Man as like fighting darkness, and he believed that the Porcupine Man's like soul, like the soul of the Flash, came from the Porcupine Man and entered him, and that's why he thinks he's the Flash. And so Jerry lies to David because he doesn't want David to know that the Porcupine Man is Wally, because they're trying to keep Wally's whereabouts a secret. So they decide that, like, Wally's super speed must have caused him to enter some kind of alien dimension, and that's why his body is currently insane, because his mind isn't even there. It's in another dimension, created from his super speed outburst that he created. So they decide to get help from somebody who can traverse dimensions, which is Chester. So they call Chester, and Chester agrees to come and help Wally. So he teleports over there. I thought he lost his powers, but I guess he must have absorbed the antimatter device again, because it did get taken out of him by Abracadabra, but he seems to have his powers back, so I guess he absorbed it again. We just didn't see it. He absorbed it off panel. But he pops back. Like, he pops over to where Wally and the others are using his powers. He accidentally brings his little cousin with him. She's like, whee! and then he uses his powers to enter the dimension that Wally is trapped in, and finds Wally's, like, spirit form within, and touches Wally's spirit form, and brings it back with him to the outside world, so that Wally's body has like his mental spirit in it again. And Wally wakes up and realizes that he's covered in like spines, and that he wasn't imagining, like, because in his head he knew he'd become like the Porcupine Man and stuff. So he sees what he looks like, and he freaks out, starts running around like crazy. They're all like, "Oh my god, we gotta calm him down. Like, he's at risk of like destroying everything. We gotta make sure he doesn't get outside." And then Wally gets outside, and they're like, "Ah, shit, he's outside. We gotta stop him from. Oh no, he's running away. Like, quick, we gotta do something." And Wally runs off at the speed of sound. He's like, "We gotta stop him before he like runs into something." And Wally runs straight into a wall made out of ice. He's like, "Who did that? I'll smash you." And that's when the town comes in, and they're like, "It's the Porcupine Man, get him!" And Captain Cold's like, "No, he's mine." And so Captain Cold and Golden Glider show up, ready to fight Wally, aka the Porcupine Man. So we'll find out how this climatic battle, like what happens next in the next issue. Captain Cold and Golden Glider versus Wally West. So, issue 28 continues right on from issue 27, written by William Mesner-Loebs, with art by Greg LaRocque and Tim DeZahn. Captain Cold and Golden Glider have come to fight Wally, who is the Porcupine Man, in order to help the town. So, they have a big fight against Wally. And Captain Cold does a pretty good job with like his ice powers. He's upgraded his technology to be a lot better. So he tries to encase Wally in ice, but Wally uses the friction, like heat friction, to melt it. So Captain Cold tries shooting a bunch of snowballs at him, and Wally just destroys them all. And so Captain Cold instead tries to encase Wally in ice by shooting ice everywhere while Wally runs around. So Wally negates that by using his speed to kind of like throw Captain Cold off balance. So Captain Cold is just like, I gotta keep shooting. I can't stop shooting. And he keeps shooting his ice. And as he's being spun around, he encases himself in a ball of ice, which makes Wally go like, "Wait, where'd he go?" And allows Captain Cold to then get a surprise shot on Wally from the ice that he's encased in. He shoots Wally and kind of freezes him over. But Wally kicks up a sandstorm into Captain Cold's face to kind of get him off guard. So Golden Glider comes in and is like, "I'll get him." And Captain Cold like shoots ice on the floor to make Wally lose balance. And then Golden Glider comes in and uses her ice skates to cut open Wally's stomach. But because of his metabolism, he heals pretty fast after this, so it doesn't like kill him. And then she continues to kick Wally around and manages to get out of Captain Cold's way while Wally has been knocked to the ground, so that Cold can shoot him with his ray gun again, but it still doesn't freeze him because of Wally's protective aura. Wally then claps his hands together really fast to create massive sonic boom sounds to disorientate Golden Glider and Captain Cold, which gives it an opportunity to create another sandstorm. Using like the heat of the winds, he melts Captain Cold's ice that's been encasing them, and then runs away and makes his escape. And everyone in the town is like, "He's getting away, quick, shoot him!" And they all shoot their guns. Captain Cold's just like, "No!" And like protects his sister with ice because like she was in the way as they were shooting. He's like, "You imbeciles, you nearly killed my sister." And he blasts ice at their guns and is like, "Maybe you shouldn't use those." And then the guys are like, "Hey, there's only 2 of you, there's 20 of us. Don't get in our way or we'll beat you up." And Golden Glider just cuts the guy open and kills him. It's like, "You want sweet talk? Eat dirt and die." Meanwhile, Wally has run away and he like stumbles into a bunch of like rocks, and that's where he comes across Mason. Mason gives him a jug of water to drink because Wally's really thirsty, having run across the desert. So Mason guards Wally and allows Wally to sleep because Wally is just knackered after fighting Captain Cold and Golden Glider. And meanwhile, Captain Cold gets into an interview with Linda Park. This is Linda Park's official debut. If you don't know Linda Park, she would eventually become the wife of Wally West. like girlfriend and then later wife. This is her first official debut. She is interviewing Captain Cold, and she says like, people around town are saying that the Porcupine Man is actually the Flash who has been mutated into some new and evil form. And Captain Cold's just like, no comment. And then they end the interview. And Jerry and David, the sheriff of the town, get into an argument over Wally being the Porcupine Man. And like, you know, they're saying like, the Porcupine Man isn't a monster, and David is set on the fact that the Porcupine Man stole his child. So he takes Jerry and Tina to a prison cell to keep them there, but that's when his cousin, Geraldo, reveals that he'd spoken to the children and that the children had gone off to check out the cave. So they head off to the cave that Geraldo pointed out. When they get there, they find that it's been caved in. So Captain Cold and Golden Glider come to try and help them. And Geraldo suggests that Captain Cold create like a tube out of ice so that they can funnel it through, like funnel a wire through, so that they can at least get some communication with the children while they figure out how to get them out. But like they find that like regular equipment isn't working and that they need somebody's help. And we all know that it's probably going to be the Flash. So Mason takes out all of the spikes out of Wally's body, and Wally heals right away. And as Mason is talking to him, Wally just goes back to sleep again. Falls asleep again. And eventually Captain Cold manages to create the ice pole that they're going to use to communicate with the kids. And the communication comes through Wally and Mason's radio. So Wally heads off to help the children while Mason stays behind. And Wally is like, I need a costume. So he steals he comes across Geraldo wearing his like makeshift Flash costume and steals it. And then a couple of people in town think that he's Geraldo, and so Wally beats the crap out of them and then is just like, give me the information I need. Tell me where these kids are. And so he super speeds off to the cave, takes Golden Glider's shovel and is like, hey, I'm going to need that. And then a couple of guys in town like get aggressive towards the Flash, and Captain Cold freezes them and is like, there you go, now they won't mess with you anymore. And Flash is like, hey, thanks, Cold. So he uses his super speed to dig into the Earth, and he digs so fast that the Earth doesn't actually have time to collapse. So he's just like in an air bubble that's traveling through the Earth at super speed, like digging at super speed. He makes it to where the children are, and he has to figure out how to get them out because it's collapsing. So he uses his super speed super fast to like dig back up again to the surface with the children in the air bubble to get back to the surface, and he succeeds. They get back to the surface, the children are safe, and Linda Park comes back again, and she interviews Wally and reveals that Wally was given a bunch of money from the town, and Wally decides that he's going to split it with Captain Cold and Golden Glider because they helped him and they deserve some of the reward. And so Wally then ends up going back to Chunk's place, to Chester's place with everyone, and he talks about the fact he's like, you know, they're probably going to send me a bill for all the damage I caused from my massive, like, accidental rampage. I wonder if Golden Snowball are hiring. Golden Snowball is the name of the company that Captain Cold and Golden Glider own together, and I guess we'll see what happens next, because that's the end of the issue. We kind of end on Wally figuring out how he's going to pay all the damages that he caused, and is he going to get a job with Captain Cold? Because that would be interesting. Wally working for Captain Cold. I'd like to see that. It's a good issue. I really enjoyed that. I've been enjoying all of these so far. But it's not over yet, because we got the Annual 2 coming up next, because that takes place after issue 8. So the next issue we're going to be covering is Annual 2. So next we're going to be talking about Flash Annual 2, written by William Misner-Loeb, with art by Mike Collins and Tom Poston. And this one's kind of weird because, like, even though it was released after issue 28, it takes place... Like, let's just say that this is a flashback story, because it takes place during a time where Frank is still alive, like, Wally's dad is still alive, so it takes place before Invasion, but after Millennium, because he's known as being a manhunter. But, like, this was released after issue 28. Like, this is the release order that I'm reading it in. It wasn't a case of, like, reading it out of order by accident. Like, this is when it was released. So, I'm, releasing it in issue order. So, Wally is going to go out to the videotape store, like, to the video store to check out the videos. And his mum was like, hey, you're not going out dressed like a tramp. Like, you lived in a mansion. Like, you need to put on some fancier clothes. And so Wally starts changing clothes at super speed, and he's like, how about this one? How about this one? Does this look good? Does this look good? And his mom's just like, Wally, stop. Like, you shouldn't be naked in front of your mom. And Wally's like, hey, I was doing it at super speed. Like, you couldn't even see me. And she's like, yes, but, like, the implication is still there. Like, you were still, like, I still knew you were naked, and it's wrong. Like, it's this weird conversation that they're having. And then, the Wally decides he gets frustrated and he heads off to the video store. His mom's just like, don't buy any of them because they're expensive. And Wally's like, I'm just having a look. And that's when he opens the door and he finds his dad Frank there. And his dad Frank throughout this whole issue is just unbearable. Like, constantly talking about how, like, he loved being a manhunter and that they were going to give him the world and everything. Like, he's just the worst. And so, like, he and Wally go to, like, a Mexican takeaway store, like a Taco Bell ripoff, and they get into a bit of an argument over Frank just wishing that he was still a manhunter. And while they're at this takeaway place, they meet up with this guy named George Boyd. And George Boyd basically wants to hire them to look after, like, his building, because there's these guys that come and they steal bricks from his building. I'm not joking. This is the plot. There's these guys that come, they steal bricks, and they sell the bricks for like $3 a pop. And he's like, you gotta stop these guys from stealing my bricks from my building. Because it's like a building that he uses to, like, he's gonna be making them into condos. So Frank, being the guy who's just into money, agrees to go and keep an eye on the building, and Wally goes with him. Boyd offers Frank a gun, and Frank's just like, nope, you didn't pay me to use a gun, so I'm not going to kill anyone. And Wally's just like, hey, I'm glad you didn't take that gun. And Frank is like, I only didn't take the gun because you didn't offer me enough money. If you'd offered me enough money, like, I would have had no problems killing them. And Wally's just like, you're joking, right? And Frank is just a douche. You know, he talks about how, like, he could have been a king if the Manhunter... Like, he and Wally get into a conversation. He talks about how, like, the Manhunters could have made him a king, and that he's waiting for, like, another invasion to happen because he's going to use it to his advantage. And Wally is like, there's not going to be another invasion, Dad. And his dad's just like, you never know, Wally. There might be something else. And obviously we know another invasion never ends up happening. Like, this whole story is literally just, like, Wally and his mum arguing over his dad being a douchebag and his dad trying to kill her, and Wally and Frank arguing over the fact that, like, his dad is a douchebag and that he wants to be a manhunter and that he tried blowing up his mom and shit. So Wally goes and grabs some pizzas while they wait for these guys to show up so that they can stop them from stealing the bricks. But, like, Wally and Frank just fall asleep anyway, and the guys come and they steal the bricks anyway while Wally and Frank are asleep. So they steal the bricks from the bottom of the building, and then the building collapses on top of these guys that have come to steal bricks, which wakes up Wally and Frank. And so Wally says, like, we gotta go save them because, like, they're gonna die in there, and Frank's just like, that wasn't what I was paid for, because I'm a douchebag. And Wally's just like, well, I'm a superhero, so I'm going to go in and save their asses. And he uses his super speed to take all the bricks off of them and build them into separate walls. And he saves the three guys. And then the cops come and grab the guys. And then Wally heads back, like, Wally just says, bye, Dad, you douche. and heads back to see his mum. And his mum is just like, I can't believe you went out and hung out with that fucking murderer. Like, how could you do that? You are such a terrible son. And she just spends the next 3 pages just shouting at Wally. Like, we are literally reliving the worst moments of Flash comics. It's almost like William Mesner-Loebs was like, hey, remember when Mike Baron was writing The Flash? Let's just do that for 20 pages, like, for 30 pages straight. Where, like, we just have Wally's mum going off on him of being a douche until hanging out with his douchebag father and his father who tried to murder her, which pisses off Wally so much that he's just like, I'm out of here, and he just fucking leaves. And he's like, screw you, mum, I've had enough. And then their neighbor comes in and is just like, hey, can you stop arguing? I'm trying to go to sleep. And Mary's just like, how dare you? And they get into an argument as well because Mary fucking sucks at this point in the timeline. And at this point, I was already having enough of this whole story because it's just like, why? Like, why is it set during this period of time? And why does everyone suck? You know? So Wally decides to go off and find his dad. And he remembers his dad saying, like, what his apartment number was. But he forgot his dad's apartment number anyway. So he just checks every single room at the apartment. One of them literally has, like, somebody's filming a porno in one of the rooms, which is really weird. Eventually, Wally finds the room that his dad is in alongside Boyd. And Boyd tells them to go and find his daughter, who is with this guy called Chuck. And her and Chuck have been, like, getting deep into, like, drugs. And so they need to go and stop them from, like, delivering drugs and, like, save his daughter from, like, this whole drug business shit. And, like, get the drugs from them. So they go to this motel where Chuck is. And Chuck is leaving because this guy's daughter, Lonnie, wanted to, like, give the drugs into the police. And Chuck didn't want any business in that and was kind of like, I don't want the police to arrest me, so I'm getting the hell out of here. And Wally stops him from running away, beats the crap out of him, and then gets the boyfriend to tell them where Lonnie is so that they can go and talk to her. So he tells them where Lonnie's house is, and they go and talk to her. Lonnie comes at them with a gun, but Wally is able to talk her down and takes the gun from her, and she gives the suitcase full of drugs to them so that they can hand them into the police. And while they're on their way to the police, they decide to stop off for some chili dogs. And then Wally and Frank go their separate ways with Lonnie after Lonnie has given the drugs in. And this pisses off George because George wanted the drugs. So he kidnaps... Like, Wally and Frank go back to Mary West, and they find that she's been kidnapped by Boyd and tied to a chair. So when they enter, Boyd's men tries shooting at them. He's got, like, 2 guys there, and they try shooting at them. So at super speed, Wally stops all the bullets from hitting his dad and from hitting, like, Lonnie, because Lonnie's there with, like, her kids, because she's got kids apparently. And it's really weird. Like, they suddenly, like, Lonnie's got children that George doesn't even mention, but they're here. And, like, Wally stops them from being like, I don't even know what's happening. Like, honestly, reading this, I was like, I don't even know what's happening. But all we know is that Boyd sent some guys to kill everyone. He sent some guys to kill Mary, to kill Lonnie and her children, and so Wally used his super speed to save everyone and cause the 2 guys to bump into each other by placing them close enough against each other that they would just, like, fall into each other once, you know, he stopped using his super speed. And then they opened up the bridge case to realize that it wasn't actually drugs, it was dust jackets. And that, like, George wanted the dust jackets because they're, like, collector's first editions Like, he's like, collector's first editions are only worth half as much without the original dust jackets. You know. So, like, you steal... He was, like, stealing the dust jackets because it was, like, it was a way of, like, stealing the person's... Like, half of the person's library without actually stealing the books. And then you blackmail the owner by threatening to burn the dust jackets. So, that's what he meant. Like, you steal the dust jackets from the collector books so that you can blackmail them by saying that you're going to burn the dust jackets because the books are worthless without them. So, the guys get sent into their authorities, your boy gets turned into the police after what he's done, and then Wally and Frank go their separate ways, and Frank decides to become a private investigator, something he never actually does in the Flash comics because he dies in Invasion. And then Wally and his mum decide to head off together, and Wally's just like, now about those clothes. And we're left with Wally and Mary probably having another argument. And that's what happens in this annual story. I explained it the best I could because this story is all over the place and all sorts of shit happens and it's really confusing. Like, William Mesnalois was definitely not on his game and he just did not give a shit when he wrote this. He was just like, I'm just writing whatever. And it's just not good. It's not very good. Not a very good annual. Not a very good story because Frank sucks and Mary sucks and Boyd sucks and then Lonnie, everyone sucks. The only person who doesn't suck in this is Wally, and even then, Wally isn't at his best. But yeah, don't read this one. Skip it. I highly recommend skipping it. You can tell I didn't enjoy reading it because of... Probably because of the lack of energy I have while talking about this, or at least trying to explain it. Don't worry, because Annual 2 is now over, and we'll be able to get onto something a lot more interesting, which is the next issue, issue 29. Alright, so now we're going to be talking about issue 29. We move on from Annual 2, which sucked, and we move on to issue 29, which is just fucking weird. It's not bad. I mean, the dialogue's a bit bad. I'd say, like, it's a bit weird. This whole issue is really weird. The name of the story is Casablanca Nights, and this is actually a one-off story because we got a couple of guest writers and artists. We got Len Straczewski is a guest writer. We got Grant Mime, who is a guest penciler, and I'm not really a fan of his art. And we got Paul Frick, who is the guest inker, and his inking is fine. This is definitely a step down from William Mesnalois' best stuff, but it is a step up from Annual 2. So, Wally has just done a mission with the Justice League Europe. He is a member of the Justice League Europe now, which is basically a version of the Justice League who operates mostly in Europe and other places in the world sometimes. And he heads back home to have a rest, but his mum comes in and says that, like, she's going to straighten out Chunk's appointment schedule and that she expects his place to be cleaned up when she gets back because it's a mess. But Wally decides not to do that and instead decides to go and have fun in Paris. And he gets into, like, his jelly teleporter because he has one of those, and he ends up in he doesn't end up in Paris. He ends up in Lisbon, and so Wally's just like, is there anything fun to do in Lisbon then? And this, like, butler guy who is... I'm assuming he's at, like, the JLA, like, Lisbon headquarters, but, like, their butler there is just like, well, you could always go to, like, Casablanca. And he's like, Casablanca? That sounds amazing. And so Flash heads off to go to Casablanca, and he's like, wait, you need a boat. But because he's the Flash, he decides to run across the water. But even he can't run across the water super well, so he ends up falling into the water, and then a helicopter helps him out, and he's like, thanks, guys. And so Wally super speeds off to a place called Dick's All-American Diner. And he shows up at Dick's, he takes his costume off and makes himself look all nice. And when he gets there, he orders some food, and it tastes awful. and he's just like, ugh, this is terrible. And a guy there who is a member of the Estonian secret police, his name is Yuri. He thinks that Wally is a member of the CIA, and Wally's like, I'm not a member of the CIA. And then this guy basically says to Wally, there are 2 assassins here. There's this woman named Cyanide over there, who is this assassin with a whip, and then there's a man over there whose name is Merlin with a bow and arrow. And you are not mistaken when I say that it is that Merlin. If you're wondering what Merlin it is the Green Arrow arch nemesis Merlin. For some reason, Len Straczynski was just like, I want to use Merlin as my main villain in this Flash story. So Merlin is here. His name's not Malcolm Merlin, or maybe he becomes known as Malcolm. I think he is Malcolm Merlin, but most who know him as Merlin. But they're there waiting for this woman who is escorting a Russian scientist who is a member of the KGB. And this lady shows up, and her name is Phantom Lady. And she's a brand new character that's being introduced in this story. And she has the ability to phase her body so that people just phase straight through her like a phantom. And this scientist guy is like a food specialist, and his job is to make food taste bad to ruin the food supplies of their enemies. So he's come to Dick's Diner because the food tastes terrible, so that he can like sample their food so he can make bad tasting food. And so when they show up, Cyanide and Merlin are like, hey, we're gonna kill you. But Cyanide and Merlin don't realize that they were there at the same time. So they're just like, huh, what are you doing here? I'm here to kill them. No, I'm here to kill them. And they get into a big fight with, a big fight breaks out with the Flash and Phantom Lady. And so Wally and Phantom Lady team up to fight Cyanide and Merlin. And then the entire diner turns against them, because Cyanide and Merlin say, like, if you kill Phantom Lady and the Flash for us, we'll pay you $20,000. So the entire diner turns against them. And so Phantom Lady and Flash grab the Russian scientist, and Flash uses his super speed to get them all out of there, because there's just too many people and they're getting overwhelmed. And they're like, we gotta get out of here. So they find like it's one of those like carriages with like a bike on it. And so Flash decides to pedal the scientist and Phantom Lady like to the airport so they can get out of the country and get the scientist to safety. But he wants to stop at every single place that they come across so he can try their food. So they end up just going on a massive road trip trying all this food, which just Wally just gets fed up by the end. And they take so long, but that by the time they get to the airport, Merlin and Cyanide have been waiting there for them. And they're like, about time you showed up. You took so long that, like, she and I started actually bonding, and now we're working together, and, you know, we're actually gonna split the prize. You know, she gets the Phantom Lady, and I get you, Flash. And so a big fight breaks out again with Merlin and Cyanide. Phantom Lady fights Cyanide and beats her pretty easily. And Merlin shoots a bunch of arrows at Flash, and Flash is just like, is that all you got? Because he's like catching all the arrows. He keeps catching Merlin's arrows, and Merlin just ends up depressed. He's just like, no. And then he tries shooting a gas arrow. He's like, I'm going to kill you with my gas arrow then. And he's like, you can't dodge this. He shoots the arrow, and Flash just grabs it and turns it to dust. And so Merlin takes a woman hostage, and he's like, I'm going to blow her brains out. I'll do it. And then he gets hit over the head by a suitcase being carried by by Yuri, the guy from earlier, the secret police dude. And he reveals that the briefcase that he has is for the scientist, and it's the scientist's recipes for all the bad food that he makes. And so Yuri decides to stay behind and take care. He's like, I'll take care of Merlin and Cyanide. I'll turn them into the authorities. You guys get out of here. And the scientist is sent onto a plane to safety. And Wally asks Phantom Lady to come home with him. And Phantom Lady says, I've had enough fun for tonight being in Casablanca. And so Wally heads home alone. And when his mum comes home, she thinks that Wally has been sleeping all day. She's like, I've been gone for 8 hours and he's still the same place he was when I left him. And he's like, I swear that boy is dreaming his life away. And Wally looks at a sticker of Dick's Diner on his teleporter and has a little bit of a chuckle to himself. And that's the end of the issue. No joke, that was the story. And like I said, not bad, just fucking weird. Like, why Merlin? Why Merlin? It's just so random. It was just like, oh, and this woman named Phantom Lady who is this brand new character that we've never met before. It's like, alright. I recommend at least checking this issue out because it's really bizarre and you don't need any context on what's going on in the current series. So now we move on to Flash issue 30, written by William Mesner-Loebs again, with art by Greg LaRocque and Larry Malstedt. The trio is back together. This one is real good. Massive step up from the last one. The last one was weird. This one's good. So Wally and his mum Mary are having the usual arguments. Wally has a lot of plans that he wants to do. And his mum is just complaining that, like, he never has time for her. And so, Mason and, Jay Garrick's wife, Mrs. Garrick, Joan Garrick, can hear the argument going on. And Wally decides to leave because he's just had enough arguing. And he bumps into Joan, and Joan's just like, hey, Wally, like, would you like to go for a walk just so we can talk? And Wally's like, yeah, of course. So he and Joan decide to go for a walk together. And he just talks about the fact that, like, his mum is driving him insane. And he just can't take it anymore. And Joan tells Wally, suggests that he move out of New York, because he's currently living in New York. They don't mention it very often, but he lives in New York. And she recommends that he move to Keystone City. Like a place like Keystone City, because it will probably be a lot nicer, because and it will be like away from his mum, and apparently just Keystone is a nicer place to live than New York. And Wally's just like, I don't know, like that just seems like it's a long way away, and like I guess I make a salary from the JLE, but I don't know, I think it's just something I'm gonna have to think about, you know. Meanwhile, his mum Mary has recently, like, hacked into Wally's JLE teleporter, and, like, she uses it to just go on holidays sometimes, and so she decides to take a break, and she heads to Spain. And while she's in the Spain headquarters, you get, like, a little cameo of Power Girl, like, flying by and looking at her, like, what? Is that Wally's mum? And so Wally just decides to go off to a cafe in Spain and spend some time there, spending some of Wally's money. Wally has a date with Connie. They've made a date to go and see a movie. Connie is the model that Wally is currently dating. We don't see her very often. I feel like this is the second or third time we might have seen her in this entire run. His mum hates her because she thinks that she's a gold digger. And Wally's just like, Connie's not a gold digger. I'm not even rich anymore. You know, and she's still with me. So Connie's frustrated that Wally was late, even though they are 40 minutes, like they came to the movie 40 minutes early anyway, so they're still 10 minutes early. She's like, why did you want to come to the movie so early anyway? And Wally's like, when I was Kid Flash, I was late all the time. You know, I went 10 years missing the intro to every single movie. You know, Barry and I were both late all the time. So now I'm finally able to, like, so now I make sure that I'm super early to everything so that I'm never at the risk of being late. The movie that they're watching, it's really weird. It's like an erotic movie or something. You'd swear they were watching like a porno or something, or like it's like softcore porno, the way that they describe it, which is really weird because like Connie talks about how like she's like, oh, Wally, you brought me to this movie hoping that I get all hot and bothered, and Wally's like, did it work? It's like, did it work? Maybe we should go back to mine and see if it worked. Obviously he doesn't say exactly that, but he pretty much says stuff along those lines. And as Wally's talking to Connie, he notices that she just freezes and she stops responding to him. And then he notices that everyone in the cinema is frozen and isn't moving. And then he turns his head and he feels something prod into his neck. And he's like, what was that? And he sees that it's a bullet frozen in the air. And that's when Wally realizes that, like, he must have felt the bullet in his neck and subconsciously turned on his super speed. So he's in super slow-mo right now. Because somebody tried shooting at him. But they didn't just try shooting at him. They tried shooting at everyone in the cinema. So Wally is like, okay, I gotta figure out where this this dude with the gun is, and stop him before I slow down and time speeds up again, because otherwise these people might be in a lot of danger, you know? So he puts on his Flash costume and he decides to investigate. It's really cool. This entire story takes place in slow-mo speed, like in speed time. Meanwhile, Mary is at a cafe having a drink, and this mysterious dude comes up to her and is like, hey, beautiful woman, you want to have a dance? He's like this older guy. And so she's like, oh yes, of course, sweep me away, mysterious man. And so they start having a dance, and then this guy comes up to him and tries to stab this dude that's dancing with Mary. And she's like, stop that man. And he like runs away with his knife. But Mary's like, watch out, and kind of like moves him out of the way a little bit, so she saves his life. Meanwhile, Wally in super speed finds like all these different bullets throughout the room, going towards people's heads and stuff, so he like grabs them out of the sky because they're frozen in time. Meanwhile, Mary is kind of like walking through the streets of Italy, looking for this guy that almost got stabbed, because he's disappeared, and she gets attacked by the guy with the knife, but then her mysterious friend comes up from behind and cross-chops him and knocks him out. Meanwhile, Wally trips over somebody by accident and stumbles upon the guy with the gun. He's hiding it in the newspaper, and so Wally gets rid of the newspaper, takes all of the bullet clipping, like the bullets out of the gun, and then waits for time to speed up. And then he's just like, hey dude, drop these, because the guy like tries to fire his gun and it doesn't work, and the dude's like, he's like, hey, drop these, and he's like, no, what, no, and then Flash, like, Wally flicks all the bullets into the guy's head, knocking him out. They all go like ding, 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 into his head, and it knocks him out. And meanwhile, the dude that met Mary reveals himself to be Inspector Antonio Verdi of Interpol, and that he was sent to pursue that man with the knife across 3 continents. And he's like, it was a pleasure meeting you. Like, I hope we can see each other again. And he kisses Mary on the hand, and she's like, oh my gosh. And meanwhile, Wally explains to Connie, like, what happened with that dude. And then he tells Connie, he's like, because of that guy with a gun in the cinema, I've had enough of New York, and I'm moving to Keystone City. And Connie's like, really? And Wally's like, yeah, but you live, like, your modeling career is here in New York, so, like, we're gonna have to, like, it's gonna be hard to do long distance. And she's like, Wally, you have super speed. You can just speed your way here in, like, 20 seconds flat. And it's like, actually, by the way, why don't you speed me to your apartment, and I'll tell you my opinion on that movie, because you asked me what my opinion was on the movie earlier. And Wally's just like, yeah, sure, let's go, because that's Connie's code for let's go back to the apartment and have sex. So Wally carries her back to his apartment, to her apartment, and to have sex. They have sex off panel, and then Wally says goodbye to her as he comes back home to his mum, and he tells his mum that he's going to move to Keystone City. And she's like, you're moving? And you'd think that she'd blow up about it, but she admits that, like, if that's what he wants, then that's okay. And she's like, does that mean you're going to take the teleporter that you have? And Wally's like, maybe, but, like, I don't really know how I'm going to move it, so that's something I'm going to have to figure out later. And she's just kind of like, phew, I'm glad, because I want to keep going back to Spain and different countries, and I think she's happy because it means that she might be able to see that inspector again, who I have a feeling might end up being a reoccurring character or a love interest for Mary throughout these issues. And that's where the issue ends. It ends with Wally deciding that he's going to move to Keystone City, and he's finally moving away from his mom, and they're going to be spending less time together, like they're not living together anymore. And it's exciting. We're going to see Wally move to Keystone City, which is a huge moment in Wally's life, and a huge moment in the Flash series, because that, as you know, like, Keystone City will become his main city throughout the rest of Flash history, you know, which is exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. Alright, and so now we move on to issue 31, The Comfort of a Stranger, written by William Mesner-Loebs, with art by Larry LaRocque and Larry Malstead. So we start off with this mother named Carmen Valeria and her son Antonio, who are walking through an alleyway. They're currently homeless because she was with her boyfriend and he was a dick and like beat her like 2 weeks ago, and now she's out on the street with her son. They come across these two guys who it looks like they're going to attack Carmen, but it turns out they're just there to give her food because they work for they're a part of like a homeless shelter, and so they've come to find Carmen and give her food. And that's when this mysterious person comes, this gross-looking dude, who calls himself the Comforter. And he is this gross-looking dude who has the ability to phase energy, and he can, like, grab people and just microwave them with his touch. So he picks up one of these nice guys and just boils his insides, and, like, bile and stuff comes out of his mouth. It's really disgusting. And then he's just like, who's next to be comforted? And comes at Carmen and the other dude and kills them off panel. The only one who survives is Antonio. Meanwhile, Wally is with Mason Trowbridge, who is trying to fix their TV, and he sees Linda Park on TV, and she's doing a report on the on the murders, and she kind of she talks about the, like, people without a home, like, quite derogatively, and this pisses off Wally. And Pied Piper is there, and he's like, I'm gonna find a murderer, I swear, because as you know, Pied Piper is now helping people that are less fortunate. He's like, I'm gonna find the murderer, and Linda Park's like, get him out of here, he's ruining my broadcast. And so Wally uses his super speed to go and talk to Linda, and Linda's just kind of, like, she's not very nice. She's like, you should be caring more about real people, not about these homeless people. And Wally's just like, I care about everyone, and I'm gonna save them, and you should be a better person, Linda. And he runs off. And meanwhile, Mason decides to go and spend time with his family, who he hasn't seen in a while. And Mary goes off to Athens, and she's just out of the book. Like, she's not in the rest of the issue. She's just like, I'm gonna go off to Athens, and that's the last time you see her. So Wally heads to this guy called Lieutenant George, who I'm pretty sure is a new character, in order to see if he can help him investigate who this murderer is. But Lieutenant George is like, I don't have the resources or the money to investigate this guy, so you're gonna have to do most of the work, Wally. Like, are you okay with that? And Wally's like, yeah, like, that sounds nice. I'll make sure. So Lieutenant George tells Wally to go to a place called Jude's Shelter, where the victims were seen, like, to be. Like, that's where they usually are. And he meets Sister Mary Elizabeth, who is the owner of the shelter, and she introduces him to two people at the shelter whose names are Kath Tarlins and Will Jones. And for some reason that, like, I thought that would be important, but it isn't, because it doesn't play into it. I think Will Jones might actually play into this, because he kind of looks like someone familiar that we'll see later on. But yeah, he gets introduced to them, and then gets told about how, like, the Pied Piper is making his own shelter for people, but they're technically squatting, so it's illegal. So Wally goes to have a chat with them so that they don't get arrested. Meanwhile, Mason's spending time with his family, and that's all that happens there. And they're talking about the Flash and stuff, and he even talks about, like, introducing the Flash to his family, because they're friends. Meanwhile, Linda gets, like, provoked by her boss, and her boss is just like, you need to start, like, thinking more like the Flash, Linda. Like, maybe he's right about this whole thing. You're being a bit harsh on these people. You know, I remember a time when all you really cared about was, like, Koreans. And she's like, you know what? Maybe you're right. And it's a bit of a weird comparison to be like, oh, well, I guess Linda was, like, kind of racist or whatever, or just, like, didn't care about anything except for her own people. But yeah, it's a weird comparison, but we're just gonna move on because now Linda is a better person, and because of that conversation with her boss, she's rethinking, you know, her actions. So Wally finds this place called Free Space, which is the place that Pied Piper has opened up where all these people are squatting, and he runs in order to stop them. And Pied Piper's just like, I'm trying to help these people. Like, you could help me. And Flash is like, you're breaking the law. That's not going to help anyone. And they start to butt heads, and then this little kid comes up and is just like, hey, you guys are going to fight now, right? And they're like, what? He's like, yeah, you're going to fight each other, but then you're going to realize that you're both on each other's side, and you're going to team up against the bad guy and win. And Flash is like, wow, I'm starting to feel real predictable right now. Pied Piper's like, let's skip the fight and just get to the team up. So we got a little bit of a fourth wall break. And that's when Pied Piper introduces Wally to Antonio. And Antonio explains to Wally, like, what this guy did. That he called himself the Comforter, and that he, like, fried his mom and these two guys just by touching them. Meanwhile, we find out who the Comforter is. We don't actually learn his name at all, but all we know is that, like, this turns out to be connected to a Batman story for some reason. So around the same time that this issue came out, there was a Batman story going on at the time called Batman the Cult, which had, like, a villain called Deacon Blackfire, who basically took, like, all of, like, the homeless people and created, like, his own cult to turn against, like, the rich, and, like, controlled them and stuff, and murdered people and shit like that. And this guy was hurt by that. And he talked about, like, his wife was killed by Deacon Blackfire's cult, and his life was ruined by Deacon Blackfire. And Batman was there, but he didn't save him fast enough to save, like, he wasn't fast enough to save his wife. And so now he's sworn to make all homeless people pay because of it. And that's why he's killing specifically homeless people. So Linda Park comes on TV and announces that they're going to be opening up a new shelter. And he's just like, I guess I'm going to go attack this shelter because I hate homeless people and all homeless people must die. And so this guy, whose name we don't know yet still, and I don't think we ever find out his name. I guess the point is that he is supposed to just be anyone on the street. He goes onto a subway train where Mason Trollbridge happens to be. And Mason talks about how he's going to meet the Flash. And then this guy is like, you know, after tonight, the plague of parasites will be over. They want the good life? I'll give them the comfort of a good death. And Mason's just like, what the fuck? Did you hear what that guy just said? Like, did he just say he's gonna, like, go and kill a bunch of homeless people? And, so it turns out it's a trap that they're holding for the Comforter. Like, Linda Park went on TV for the Flash because she's got a change of heart. So they're waiting for the Comforter to show up so they can trap him. And, then Mason shows up and is like, hey, Flash, like, that guy that you're trying to trap, he was on the subway with me. That can't be a coincidence. And it isn't, because the Comforter shows up, and because he already realized it's a trap, and he's like, hey, you tried to trap me? Well, I guess I'll just have to kill you then. And so, like, he tries to touch the Flash, and that's when the Flash realizes that the Comforter has the ability to phase energy, And so the Flash uses his speed to phase the energy straight back at the Comforter, and it kills him. His energy hits him back, and the Comforter dies from his own powers. He's like, geez. And Wally's just like, geez, I gotta get out of this town. And that's the end of the issue. There's a big conflict with the Comforter. He tries to kill the Flash. His powers backfire and he dies. And then Wally decides, I gotta go to Keystone City because I just murdered a man. It's like, what the fuck? This issue was alright. I liked it. It was weird. I don't get what, like, why is William Mesner-Loeb so obsessed with, like, incorporating Batman shit into his stories? Because I already know coming up later, the Joker plays the main villain in a issue of The Flash, which is really weird. And then we have this guy who's directly connected to Batman the Cult. It's like William really wanted to write Batman, but he was stuck writing The Flash, so he was like, I'm gonna use some of the Batman shit that I want to use, you know, and tie it into The Flash for some reason. But it was fun. It was a weird guy, weird villain, cool powers. Yeah. All around good. And we got to see some development for, like, Linda Park and Wally as characters and their relationship. And we got to see Pied Piper and the Flash kind of develop their friendship. So, all around, pretty good. So, now we're on to the final issue of the episode, issue 32. Welcome to Keystone City is the name of the story. And so, Wally is heading off to Keystone City because he's finally moving there, and he decides that he's visiting Keystone City with both Mason Trollbridge and Hartley Rathaway, aka the Pied Piper. And while they're making their way to Keystone City, they are being watched by a mysterious old man. And this old man has, like, somebody working with him who talks really slow. But we never actually get to see their face, and we never get to see who this old man is. Like, we don't know their name right now. We don't know who they are. I kind of have an idea on who they are, but I don't want to say who it is just in case it ruins the surprise for anyone. I don't know for sure. So, while they're making their way through Keystone City, because Wally's just like, I moved to Keystone City because people are trying to kill me in New York. I should be safe here. While they're driving, there's a family with, like, a mum and a son in it, and the son, like, drops his hat out the door, like, out the window. So Wally uses his speed to jump out of the car, grab the hat, jump into their car, give them the hat, and then jump back into his own car. Or, like, he, like, runs past their window and hands the hat back to them, and Mason's just like, Wally, like, you left the driver's seat, because Wally was driving. He's like, you left the driver's seat, you idiot. And Wally's like, hey, it's fine, I used my super speed. I was back in a second. And so, this mysterious old man is like, Wally West is coming in on my turf, so I've got to make him pay. And also, this Hartley Rathaway is related to the, like, his parents are related to this character as well, in terms of, like, this mysterious old man does not like Hartley's parents and they owe him something. So we'll find out what develops of that a little bit later. So Wally, Mason, and Hartley visit Joanne Garrick's house. Meanwhile, she's, like, happy to see them. Meanwhile, the Rathaways, like, the Rathaway family outside of Hartley, are visited by these two guys named Jonas Slow and so it's Jonas Slow, Frederick Steady, and then there's another guy mentioned called Mr. Sprint, but he's currently outside and we don't get to see who that is, but there's apparently a third guy called Mr. Sprint in the area too, waiting outside. They blow open the doors to the Rathaway house, and they essentially are just like, tell us where the goods are. You owe the goods for my master. Tell us where they are. And Mr. Rathaway is like, no, I won't. And so Mr. Slow has like these energy powers, and he just blasts Mr. Rathaway. He doesn't kill him, but he puts him in like a really damaged spot where like Mr. Rathaway is pretty badly hurt. He's like, everyone suffers if you don't tell me where these goods are. At the Garrick household, Hartley decides to call his parents so that they can go visit them. And on the other side of the phone is Hartley's mum. And she refers to Hartley as Mr. Jiggs. And that's kind of a little bit of a code word to Hartley that something's wrong, because Mr. Jiggs was the puppet that he had as a 5-year-old. And so Wally's like, alright, if something's going on, then I'm going to go check out the Rathaway household, and you guys can catch up with me later in the car. And so Wally decides to head off on his own as the Flash, and Mason, Joanne, and Hartley decide to go after him as well, so that they can meet him at the Rathaway household. Wally gets to the Rathaway household, and as soon as he arrives, he gets attacked by Mr. Sprint. Mr. Sprint is this dude in like massive armor with his own goons, and they like the Flash tries to fight him, but Mr. Sprint is just too powerful, and he like beats the crap out of Wally, and then Wally gets teamed up on by Mr. Slow, and they finish off Wally because he uses his energy powers on Wally as Mr. Sprint punches him, and they knock Wally out. They then tie him up in the house, and they tie him up in a way where if Wally moves, it'll tighten around his neck and choke him to death. So there's no real way of Wally being able to get out. Like, he can't even vibrate out, because if he vibrates, he'll die. So Mr. Slow is looking for a book. He's telling them, he's like, get me that book. We don't know what this book is, but he wants a book. And Mr. Slow holds... it's not Mr. Slow, it's Mr. Steady is holding Hartley's sister hostage and is threatening to kill his sister if they don't give him the book. And that's when Joan Garrick and Mason, who has a whip, he like found a whip and he's got a whip. That's literally what he says. He's like, where'd you get that whip? He's like, I found it. And Hartley break through the doors, and Hartley like uses his like horns to throw Mr. Steady off guard so that he can grab his sister and get her to safety. Joan cuts Wally free, and Wally saves Mason from Mr. Stride and Mr. Slow by grabbing Mason and taking him away. And then he comes back and he makes Mr. Stride accidentally hit Mr. Slow, because Mr. Stride tries to punch Wally, and his hand phases through Wally and hits Mr. Slow in the face, knocking him out. And then the Pied Piper uses his horns to distract Mr. Stride so that Wally can just like punch him in the face a million times, which knocks him out. Hartley has a nice moment with his parents where his parents are finally proud of him. Before they kind of just didn't give a shit about what he did, but now they're like, you know what, you really care about us, and we've seen the error in our ways, and we just want to be a tight-knit family from now on. We love you, and we're so proud of you. And so they have a really heartfelt moment where Hartley has a hug with his mum, and meanwhile this mysterious old man is watching. He's like, they've ruined my plans, but it won't happen again. And earlier on I forgot to mention, but this old man mentions Jay Garrick as if he knows him pretty well. So this is like an old enemy of Jay Garrick. And that's it for issue 32. And the next issue is the one with the Joker in it. So we got that to look forward to. So this is going to be it for this episode of Flash Forward and the Marvel and DC Retrospective podcast. If you enjoy the episode, feel free to... If you enjoy this podcast, please rate the podcast, give it a good rating, and because it really helps. It'll help draw in more people to listen to it. Share it around if you can. You know, if you know anyone who you think would be interested in the podcast, feel free to, like, it'd be awesome if you could like share it with them. And yeah, so, and you can follow me on Twitter at KChaimbo, CHAMBO. It's where I update about the podcast. It's where I talk about comic books. You'll find a little bit more insight on certain comic books that I'm reading at the time that aren't Flash related. So if I'm like I'm currently reading Teen Titans at the moment. So if you want to know my opinions on that, you can go see my opinions on New Teen Titans by Marv Wolfman and George Perez over on my Twitter account. But that's going to be it for this episode, and I'll see you next week for more of the Flash. I'm going to be doing more Flash because there's no events coming up yet. So this has been Flash Forward, and thank you for listening. See you next time.